Hey, I'm 978 for 5:30.
What's your first name?
Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
These are good temporary ones.
Yeah.
The other ones will.
Yeah, let's do glasses on. We gotta be.
Yeah, you gotta be cool.
We gotta be cool, Tim. All right, Tim. First Seward Park crit. How'd it go?
Oh, it's fantastic. You know, wasn't sure about how we were going to do, but we really dug deep there in the second half, and I couldn't be more proud of the results.
How did your legs feel when you
Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks again for watching. This is the third installment of my Seward Park crit racing. This is actually the sixth week of the Seward Park crits of 2019, but I've missed three of them, and I've only been to three, and this is the third one. So I want to start this video out by giving a little shout out to the Rapha team, the Seattle Rapha team. A couple of the guys, Thomas specifically, saw my video from last week, sent me a message on Facebook, asked me if I wanted to ride out to Seward Park with those guys, which I did today, which was awesome. Basically meant that I showed up the most rested that I've been, because it's about a 10-mile ride, and the past few weeks I've just ridden out by myself. So having those guys invite me over to their clubhouse was super cool. It was really nice of them. So Thomas and the rest of the team, thank you. You know, it just kind of goes to show, like, as I spend more and more time getting to know bicycle racers, I'm finding that of all the different activities that I engage in, and it's primarily volleyball, climbing, and cycling nowadays, that the cycling crew, like, cyclists just seem to be like the most welcoming, really friendly, you know, all kind of like supportive of each other. And my take on it, as I've started to kind of get into like training for biking and biking more, is that there's something about mutual suffering that just brings people together. You know, like, this is just one of those sports. I mean, it's just, we're all hobbyists, right? I mean, I think there's like one kid and maybe a couple guys in their early 20s in this race that, you know, who knows, may try to go on and be competitive at some point. But I think for the most of us, you know, we're just here to do the best that we can within our ability. And so, you know, we're kind of all like, you know, in that journey together, more or less. And kind of going back to the suffering thing, the mutual suffering. You know, I was in the military for a number of years, way back in the day, almost 20 years ago. And I've always said since then that there's a type of bonding that occurs when you suffer along with somebody that just, like, it just can't be replicated anywhere else. And so, you know, here we are doing this crazy race. We're basically getting on our bikes and riding as hard as we can until we can barely breathe, and honestly until at some points we can barely, I know for me, I can barely think straight sometimes. Some of the times that I'm riding or training, or I know for sure, like the first week that I rode this, I was riding so hard I barely knew where I was at some points, and that's just awesome, and you're sharing that with everybody. So, you know, when I finish these races, you know, when I look around, all I feel is kind of this camaraderie for the guys that just finished with me, and it just kind of, I don't know, it just makes me happy. It's something that's fun to be a part of. So anyways, that's my really extended, you know, digression from my desire to say thank you to the Rapha guys. Thanks, Thomas. I think it was David that gave me a pull, you know, gave us all a pull at the Seward Park, which was awesome. And I think Thomas, I think we can see him at the end, finished, he also finished like top 10. So good job, Thomas. And a couple of the Rapha guys, I'm not sure what they finished. I had to take off pretty quick after the race. I didn't get to talk to everybody, but yeah, that was awesome. So thank you guys. I wanted to So this race, as I'll explain in a little bit, is not going to be quite as exciting as my last two races. And I'll explain why. I'll explain kind of what my strategy is. But I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to throw up some of my stats, as of right now. So I'm going to do that in just a moment. Okay, so I went ahead and kind of collected some of my stats up to this point. I'm a Cat 5, I'm 37, 180 pounds. My FTP, I believe, is about 305. That's a Strava estimates. My max power is 162, or that's the best power that I've had so far. And that was just on a training ride. So yeah, so a couple stats for me. I'll try to kind of keep that going as my stats I'm assuming will increase. I'm hoping will increase with time. Okay, so I wanted to share what my strategy was for today. The last two races I had kind of hung out or tried to stay up near the fronts, like I've said in previous videos, with this idea that maybe a break would occur and I wanted to be in the break and all that kind of stuff from watching these high-level videos, watching NorCal Cycling on YouTube and then the Vegan Cyclist on YouTube. But those guys race at a very different level, and they're also racing on flat courses, whereas this is beginner level Cat 5 with some Cat 4s mixed in, and then on a course that's basically like a power interval. You go as hard as you can up this tiny little hill. You roll for a minute, you go as hard as you can outside of the corner, you roll downhill for a little bit. It's just like intervals. So the strategy's a lot different. It's more of a like kind of just hang on and survive. So that is my strategy. That's my goal for the day. Instead of trying to be in the front, I'm going to hang out in the back as much as I can, and then at about the second to last lap, I'm going to start moving up. I'm okay with putting in a big dig to get near the front for the final lap, but my goal is really to save my energy. The last time I tried to sprint at the end, I think the max power I was able to produce was like 700 watts, which is not really a sprint, but it was as hard as I could go. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how worn out my legs were at that point. So my goal in this race was just to conserve. And it's kind of exciting because since I have this rear cam, you can really get a better idea of where I'm at in the race. So like in this situation, I'm basically in the back of the race, but there's some guys that are kind of stringing out behind me. So yeah. And I apologize. I keep saying some guys, but there's actually several women in this race. So if I accidentally continue to use the term guys, I really just mean like the racers. So all the people. Because not only are there some women in this race, but the women that I saw in the race are very strong. I'm pretty sure in like the last one or two laps, one of the ladies comes flying around me and kind of kicks off in the final lap. So that's pretty awesome to see. I know at the road races that I went to this year, there were pretty big women's categories, but the last couple times I've done this crit, I don't believe there were any women that raced in it. So, it's good to see that there are some women racing in this. Yeah, so I think I did a rough head count when we were lining up at the beginning, and I counted about 40 people, give or take. There's about 40 people in this race, so this is the biggest one for me so far. The first crit I came to had 12 because that was kind of a rainy day, and then last week had about 30, which felt pretty big, and then this one has 40, which it feels about as big as the 30 last week. I think largely because the folks at the front are kind of bunched up, and then there's a lot of people that are kind of stringing out the back. I'm not sure exactly why. I don't know if they're conserving their energy or if they're just struggling a little bit, but I'm hanging back, but I'm not letting myself really split out from like the main group here, which you can see kind of blobs out at the base of the hill every time. So I let like a little bit of gap form coming around the corner and down the hill, but I immediately surge right back into the blob without much effort. So that works out pretty well. I think this one climb right here where I'm following Kirk's in the gray shirt is probably, I think, the only lap other than the second to last where I put out much of an effort. I saw Kirk going and I thought, what the heck, I'll jump on his wheel and kind of follow him up the hill. Any of you that race know that hanging in the back and conserving your energy, although a good race tactic, can be a little bit boring. So I will openly admit that patience is probably not a virtue that I have, but maybe that will come with time. But I just heard the bell for the first preem lap. So I think for these videos, I'm so far in the back that I don't actually capture who takes off for the preems, but it's usually always a couple guys. The last couple times I've raced, there's always been a few people chasing the preems, which maybe will be something that I try in the future. Because what I want to do with every crit that I race in is try a slightly different strategy, or just try different things out. So my first race was just show up and push the pedals. That was my strategy. Last week's race was try to stay to the front, and even pull a little bit if the opportunity presents itself, which it did. This week's strategy is to draft as much as humanly possible, but do so from near the back of the pack, which I basically do a pretty good job of. I kind of hang out in the back of the pack for the most part. I draft pretty well. I can see right now that I'm not like exactly on somebody's wheel, but coming into this hill, like, you don't have to really worry about it too much. It's short and the speeds aren't really high. Actually, I was wrong. I did end up close enough to the front on this lap to catch the guys taking off for the preem. I'm still a little too far away to see exactly who got it, but it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like 5 guys went off the front. I don't know if they all were actually going for the preem or if they saw it as an opportunity to try to create a breakaway, but the breakaway doesn't stick if that's what any of those guys were thinking. I know a guy at the end there kind of came and whipped up on the left, but I'm pretty sure that they hit that little headwind section at the base of the hill and just everybody kind of stopped pedaling. So yep, the Seward Park crit, no brakes. And here we've got some guy doing super aero mode. I don't even know what this thing is called, but I've seen the pros in the Tour de France do it. Some kind of super top tube seated aero thing. I don't know. I've never tried it. Looks crazy. I suppose it works. The pros do it. I don't know that. I've been trying to learn all these like new little techniques, but I don't know if I'm going to mess around with that quite yet. I descend pretty well just tucking down, but it looks cool, I guess. Kind of crazy. But yeah, so we catch that front group, the preem group, again, because as you can see, everything just slows down and kind of turns into a blob at the base of that hill. So yeah, just riding along. The guy in front of me right now in the green and black, I think is the only kid in the race. And when I say kid, I'm talking like teenager or younger. Most of the folks that I talk to are probably in their late 20s or 30s. And I think this is the only person that really looks like a kid that showed up in the race, and he does a great job. Because he's small, he always kind of doesn't get dropped, but when we're descending, he always kind of gets popped off the back a little bit. But but he's strong and he gets himself back in, so that's kind of cool to see. And then there's one of the female racers just kind of shot up on the inside. I think we see a bunch of her in my video. She basically is kind of doing the same thing I'm doing, kind of just hanging out in the drafts. I don't know how she finished. I don't know her name or anything, but I did see her a whole bunch during the race, and I saw this kid a whole bunch in the race. So we kind of all ended up kind of sticking around the same place. But yeah, you can see this kid when we get down the hill. He kind of, I have to go around him. He kind of slows down a little bit. I think because he's probably 120 pounds. He's a small guy. So yeah. Let's see. So I also want to mention that one of my teammates, so my teammate Ray Lamont, who I mentioned briefly last week, he's in this race as well, or I'm almost certain he's in this race. I haven't seen much of him. He's either a lot farther up in the front or he's a little further in the back. I'm not sure. But also my buddy Tim Kelly, who's also on my team, is in this race. And I think he lined up kind of towards the front. And I had lined up towards the back, and we hadn't really crossed paths, but I know we do eventually because I say hi to him, we chat a little bit. And Tim has never been to the Seward Park Crit before. So Tim and Ray are pretty much the only guys from my team that, do much racing or specifically criteriums. I know in the road races, a few more guys from my team will race, but it seems like most of them really aren't into doing crits. But Tim is. So I wish I could find him. I know he's in here somewhere, but you'll know Tim if you ever see him. The guy's 6'6", so he's got to be. He's probably the tallest bike racer in Seattle. I don't know that there's many guys over 6'6" that are out, racing their bicycles. So we'll see him eventually. I end up on his wheel, and he basically takes up the whole screen, fills up my whole GoPro. But that's a good teammate to have. He's a heck of a draft. So hopefully we'll catch up with him eventually. But here we have the guy doing his super aero tuck again. I think I once saw it referred to as like the Froomey or something after Chris Froome. He did it in the Tour de France, but he actually was pedaling from that position downhill, which looked really crazy. But this guy does it every time, so I'm going to take a guess he's probably a lot more experienced bike racer. So, all right. Oh, so here's Tim. All right, we finally found Tim. So he's off to the right. I'm talking to him, giving him a hard time. And I'm pretty sure that he actually kind of went off the front earlier in the race and then got brought back, or just like anybody else that tries to go off the front, just kind of just couldn't stay away. But so I'm kind of in with him now. We end up chatting a little bit, but I think he spends a lot of the rest of the race kind of doing what I'm doing, kind of just hanging out a little bit. Yep. I wish I had gotten the name of all the guys from the Rapha group. It would have been nice to give them a shout out. I know Thomas, the guy that invited me to come ride with them, is in here somewhere, but this race is just so big with 40 people. It's kind of hard to find anybody. Yeah, I see one Rapha jersey up to the right. So Rapha, they kind of have this, I don't even really know what the colors are. It's like kind of this pink and sort of this like off-white. Maybe somebody can correct me. I'm not sure what the colors are exactly, but it's like a striped jersey. But there's a handful of them that ride in this race together. But they all seem to kind of just ride alone. I haven't seen any like specific strategy from them. I'll have to talk to him about it and see kind of what they do with their Cat 5 races, because I know Thomas has mentioned that he's been doing some work trying to get these guys together and to ride together. Oh, actually, I think that's Thomas off to the right. So there's two Rapha riders, one on the left, one on the right. I think, God, I could be wrong. That's Thomas on the right. But yeah, he puts out some energy to kind of get these guys organized and get them, kind of get them riding these crits. I don't know how big the Rapha team is, but I mean, there's definitely a lot more of them racing the 4.5s than Union Bay Cycling, who I race for. Which is actually a pretty big club. I think there's something like 120 members. So a lot of our members they just race in the higher levels. So Our developmental team is, I don't know, I'm guessing, but it's probably like 8 guys. Most of them are Cat 4s, and I think just do the road races. And then, Tim and I, Big Tim and I, we're 2 of the Cat 5s, but we're both interested in racing, so we both kind of have been doing a bunch. Yeah. Well, I'm realizing that it's really boring doing an overlay in a race where all you do is sit in the back, because I'm just not doing anything. Yeah, I think this is Thomas in front of me, but yeah, I'm just not doing anything this race, which, I've got to say, like, okay, so this turns out to be, my strategy in this race turns out to be really effective. I don't want to like ruin the race for you. You'll kind of see at the end how it turns out, but I save a lot of energy doing this. So in this Criterium, racing this crit sitting in the back was easier for me than a lot of my training rides. My heart rate right now is like 160, which, I don't know how that compares like other people's heart rates, but when I'm at 160, I'm pretty relaxed. I think I forgot to turn off my Garmin at the end of the race, and so I basically rolled around for another 10 minutes with my Garmin on, and so my average speed and average power and all that got all messed up. So Tim showed me his Garmin data. My teammate Tim showed me his Garmin data, and his average speed for the race was like 23.4 miles per hour, which I guess seemed reasonable. My average was like 19 miles an hour, so you can see how badly I goofed up by not hitting stop on my Garmin. But I had to make like a rough guess on what my average power was for this race. And the previous couple weeks, it was like somewhere around 300 or a little over 300. And I think for this race, it was probably like 290 or something. I kind of took like an educated guess at the end what my average power was, but it was like several percentage less than it had been the last couple weeks. So when you add the fact that I've now started doing these crits and started training, and getting the training out of doing these crits, and the fact that I just kind of sat in the back the whole time, I stayed pretty well rested. I came into the final couple laps feeling really good, like I was going to be able to produce a good effort. I still don't have a lot of skill as far as like when to sprint, how to sprint, and how hard to go and all that. Definitely like when I jump into the sprint later on, you'll see that I think I go a little too early. I think I probably go a little too hard. And then as I'm crossing the finish line, I'm just kind of blown to pieces. So, I definitely put out a max effort, but I never really hit any like high wattage. I think instead of really sprinting, I kind of just ride hard for like 40 seconds. I don't know what that would be called. If there's like a racing term for finishing with like a 40-second effort versus like a sprint, but that's basically kind of what I've ended up doing the last few weeks. And I do that again this week, but the big difference is that I go into it just feeling better with more energy. So yeah. And let me know, for anybody watching this, if you think that rear camera is a little too small. I was kind of messing around with the size, like how much of the screen I took up with it, and I didn't want to take up too much. Obviously, I didn't want to take up too much of my front camera, but it's almost so small that it's hard to tell the identity of the people that are behind me, which is too bad. I know one of the guys from Rapha team said that he was kind of like, making funny symbols and, hand gestures and stuff into the camera, and I don't even think I've noticed it because it's maybe just a little bit too small. But it's kind of cool to see, like when we put in efforts or like on the hill climbs, to see like kind of how people kind of get dropped a little bit, and it's actually really cool. So in the last lap, like when I make my final effort, you get to kind of see like what happens to the race, how it gets all spread out, and that's kind of fun. So So it looks like we have just a couple minutes of the race left, so I'm gonna guess that this is a third to last lap. I'm not sure. You know what, this might be the second to last lap, just watching what I'm doing right now. So this is like the first time that I kind of move up a little bit. Yeah, and here's one of those female riders right up here on the right. Just, oh no, actually it's two female riders in front of me, and they're both very end of the race, just like smashing. So yeah, that's awesome. I mean, this lady is just like, you know, hammering up the hill. So pretty good to see. Yeah, it looks like I'm kind of trying to work up a little bit. Not doing a super great job apparently, but let's see if we can hear the bell ring. Hear the bell for the final lap. That's how we'll know. Yep, okay. So that's the bell. So that signifies this is the final lap. And I remember in this corner I'm thinking, oh, I'm not in good position. I'm a little too far back, which is my own fault. I let it happen on the hill. So I put in about 1,000 watts and I jump up just a few spots. And totally by accident, find myself right behind Big Tim. And we're still back. We're like 10th wheel, you know, 10th and 11th wheel. I come rolling down and just like stupid dumb luck, one of the Rapha guys jumps over, Tim jumps over, and I just slip right onto their wheel. And now all of a sudden I'm third wheel on the last lap. And this was not planned. I swear it was not planned. I don't even know who the Rapha guy is that's in the front. Tim doesn't know that I'm behind him, but we just kind of roll in. And this is pretty awesome. I'm a little worried because I'm a little too far forward, but you know, what the heck? I'm like, it's the final lap. Let's do it. The Rapha guy jumps off, throws his elbow. I put in efforts. You know, I'm 850 watts. I almost hit 900, and that's about as much as I can do right there. The three guys that the two guys come up on the left, and there's one guy that came up between me and Tim. You know, I try to jump on their wheel, but I can't. But fortunately, this guy from Fount Cycling kind of comes up around me, gives me a draft. Tim had dropped behind. He comes back around front. I jump on his wheel. He gives me the last little bit of effort I need to get past the Fount guy. And bam, we hit the finish line. Tim and I are 4 and 5. Just super awesome. So out of 40 riders, Tim took 4th, I took 5th. And yeah, best result ever. Super psyched. Throwing up my stats. I want to, once again, thanks to Rapha guys. It was super cool of you to invite me out. Maybe we can chat this week about a little strategy for the next race. And again, thanks to everyone else who has been watching my videos, everybody that came up and said hi to me last week. See you next week.